Here I want to talk about the area of a sector. And so the area of a sector is basically a part of your circle that looks sort of like a slice of pizza. So this would be me finding the area of a sector. And one of the things that we need to talk about is sometimes how the degree area is represented. So for example, I could have a circle and I could say that this is 30 degrees. Well, that 30 degrees has an equivalent radian measure as well. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We need to be able to convert between our degrees and our radians. So for example, we want to make sure we know the ratio. The radian measure is equal to the arc length divided by the radius. So one of the things we want to be able to do is convert again between degrees and radians. And how will we do that? So to go from degrees to radians, we're going to multiply by pi over 180. And to go from radians to degrees, we're going to multiply by 180 over pi. So what we're going to practice first is converting from degrees to radians. So we are going to multiply by pi over 180. First, we are going to convert 30 degrees to radians by, again, multiplying by pi over 180. And if it's easier, you can make the 30 degrees look like a fraction by putting it over 1, if that helps you. So I'm literally going to have 30 pi over 180. And at this point, I need to simplify as much as possible. I can cancel out the zeros. I'm left with 3 over 18 pi. 3 and 18 are both divisible by 3. So I end up with pi over 6 radians. So 30 degrees is equivalent to pi over 6 radians. And I'm going to do the same thing with the following numbers. So this time I'm taking 135 degrees and I am converting it to radians. Therefore, I'm going to multiply by pi over 180. And again, this is where you want to divide out whatever common factors you can. I can see this is going to give me 135 pi over 180. So I can see that 45 goes into 135 3 times. 45 goes into 180 4 times. And there goes my pi. So 135 degrees is equivalent to 3 pi over 4. Going to do the same thing with 180 degrees. I'm going to convert it to radians by multiplying by pi over 180. I end up with 180 pi over 180, which cancels out to be just pi. And last but not least, I have 360 degrees converted to radians. I end up with 360 pi over 180, which gives me a whole number of 2 pi. And these are all radians. Radians. Now again, that previous part was just about converting back and forth between degrees and radians, which sometimes you'll need to do depending on what you're trying to do. But in these two examples, I'm going to focus on finding the area of the entire circle, not just the sector, but the entire circle. So I do need a formula for that. So the area of a circle can be found by using pi r squared. And we are going to write the answer in terms of pi and with the decimal. So here I can see that my radius is 5. So all I'm going to do is plug in that 5. 5 squared is 25, so I know that the area of this circle is 25 pi. So that is in terms of pi, if your instructions ask you for that. Or I can convert it to a decimal by making pi 3.14, and that works out to be 78.5. And since this is area and it was inches, I want to make sure that I say inches squared at the end of my answer. So in the next one, same idea. I want to find the area of the entire wrestling mat. I can see here that the diameter this time is 32, but for my formula, I need the radius. So the radius in this problem is actually 16. So when I plug that in, I get 16 squared. So this means the area of the wrestling mat is 256 pi feet squared, or I can convert it and get approximately 804 feet squared. So this time I use the approximately symbols, so I can go ahead and give it as a whole number. So since we've been working on finding the area of an entire circle, now it's appropriate for us to talk about finding the area of just a sector or a section. So as you can see, this is a portion of a larger circle, and I only want to find the area of this part. So what's good is that I am going to use part of what we already know, which is the area of a circle, pi r squared. And the part that I'm going to multiply it by is the portion that I'm looking for. So the measure of this arc I know is 120 degrees because the central angle is 120 degrees. And that out of a total circle is 360. So the portion of the area that I'm looking for is this fraction, and we're going to multiply it by the area. I can see here that the radius is 3, so I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. Three squared I know is 9, so I'm just going to keep going, and this is actually a times. Three squared is 9, so that's going to end up being 9 pi. And in order to multiply that whole number and that fraction, again, sometimes it's easier to put it over 1. Again, I always try to simplify as much as possible. I can see here that 12 and 36 are both divisible by 4, so I'm just going to keep breaking it down as much as possible. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 36 divided by 4 is 9. I can continue to simplify that as 1/3. So 3 over 9 is the 1/3, and I'm just going to bring this down. Times 9 pi over 1. I end up with 9 pi over 3, which simplifies to 3 pi. And don't forget, this was centimeters, so it's area, so it's going to be centimeters squared. So the area of just this sector is 3 pi centimeters squared. So I left this answer in terms of pi. We're going to continue to practice finding the area of these sectors or sections of the circle by using that formula. Again, we're going to take the portion of the circle that we're trying to find, and we're going to multiply it by the area of a circle. And then we're going to simplify that fraction as much as possible, sometimes leaving it in terms of pi, sometimes not. So in the first one, the portion of the circle that I'm looking for is 45 degrees. So that is the portion that's going to go over my fraction. I can also see here that my radius is 18. So that's the part that's going to get plugged in there. And 18 times 18 is 324. So I'm going to just keep on simplifying. I'm also going to get I'm going to simplify this 45 over 360. I know that 45 and 360 are divisible by 9. So 45 divided by 9 is 5. 36 divided by 9 is 40. And I can keep going. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 40 divided by 5 is 8 times 324 pi. Again, to simplify that, put it over 1. This is going to give me 324 pi over 8, which is going to go ahead and simplify down to just 40.5 pi yards squared. Now, I went ahead and put this in a decimal because it terminated at 0.5. If it was a repeating decimal, I wouldn't have done that. So for the next one, I'm trying to find the area of this sector. My radius this time is 16, and I can see here that my degree is 90 because of that box there. So I'm going to have the area is 90 over 360 times pi r squared. In this case, it's 16. 16 times 16 is 256. I am going to cancel out those zeros. 9 over 36, I know is just 1/4. Again, 16 times 16 is 256 pi. You can put it over 1 if you need to. So I end up with 256 pi over 4, which is going to simplify down to just 64 pi. This time it was centimeters squared. Again, area is always squared. Now in this last one, you want to be careful, don't jump to conclusions. I am looking for this area, which is not 120, but instead 180 minus 120, which is 60 degrees. So my area here is going to be 60 over 360 times pi r squared. My diameter is 26, so that means my radius is 13. I'm going to just go ahead and keep simplifying as much as possible. This I know is going to eventually be just 1 over 6 times 13 times 13 is 169 pi over 1. And I actually cannot simplify this fraction anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and just write meters squared and leave it in terms of pi. Carlene has a fresh slice of pizza. On the left, its angle measure is marked, and this actually says 40 degrees if you can't see it, and it wants to know what is the area of the pizza. So basically, how much cheese do I need to cover this pizza? How much am I covering? I can see here that from the tip of the pizza to the crust, it's 9 inches, so that actually represents the radius. And I'm just going to use the same formula I've been using. So this time it's going to be 40 out of 360 times pi, and my r is 9. I know 9 times 9 is 81. Again, I'm going to simplify as much as possible. 4 over 36. I know 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 36 9 times. 81 pi. Put it over 1 if you need to. Ends up being 81 pi over 9, which does simplify to just 9 pi inches squared, or approximately 28 inches squared. So either one of these answers would have been appropriate. Again, depending on how the instructions ask you to express the answer. This one didn't say.